Hey, what's up, guys? You're now listening to Devo with Uncle Theo. Today is day 84, and we're going to cover Judges chapter 8 and 9. We pick back up with Gideon today. Remember, they won the battle with the 300, with the lappers, and I need to come up with that tribe. We need to be team lappers. That's exactly who we need to be. I'm looking to build a team of lappers, crazy, inexperienced people whom will trust the Lord fully and in whom the Lord will use. But back to our text, we pick back up in chapter 8. And what's going to happen here, remember, it's just a vicious cycle over and over again. And that cycle gets worse and worse, even to the point where you're going to start to see a lot of many civil wars. And this shouldn't surprise you because remember, when we were walking through Joshua, you remember those 2.5 tribes wanted to divide from the start, but they used a lot of flowery language to make it look like they just wanted the land and wanted to be there. And quite naturally, that may have been their initial motivation, but they were destroying the unity and they weren't truly fulfilling the Abrahamic covenant of going into the land. But not just even on the east side of the Jordan, on the west side as well, you're just going to start to get a lot of factions and division, and it's going to cause all these many civil wars. They're going to break over and over again until we'll get our biggest civil war where they divide. But that comes later. After the reign of Solomon, they'll officially divide into 2 territories. But here in chapter 8, it says in verse 4 that Gideon and the 300 who came to the Jordan and crossed over, weary yet pursuing, he said to the men of Succoth, please give loaves of bread to the people who are following me, for we are weary. And so they won't help Gideon. And Gideon says, all right, when the Lord has given Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, I will thrash your bodies with the thorns of the wilderness and the briars. And he went up from there to Penuel and spoke similarly to them, saying, when I return safely, I will tear down this tower. And it happens in verse 16, he took the elders of the city and the thorns of the wilderness and the briar, and he disciplined the men of Succoth with them, and he tore down the tower and killed the men of the city. And look at this. This is Israel fighting each other. They're imploding. This is a civil war, and this is the stuff of Judges. This is how bad it's getting. A people, when we saw the second generation that had it going on, then one generation of that, you get this. What should that tell us about our children and our children's children? Man, if we don't pour into them, if we're not vigilant about the next generation and our grandkids, it can get really wicked really fast. You don't believe me? Just go into your local public elementary right now and look at how our children are being trained. Just look at America right now and look at what they're pumping into our children and what's the norm and being accepted and what we're being bombarded with on a daily basis right now. And so this is how we wrap up chapter 8. And so with the city imploding, the men of Israel come to Gideon and say, man, we want you to rule over us. We want you to be our king. And it looks like Gideon is being humble. He knows he's not the king. And he says, hey, I can't be your king. In verse 23, he says, I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you. Yahweh shall rule over you. We're like, wow, Gideon, man, that's good. You're a godly guy. But look at his very next statement. God will rule over you. All right. Hey, give me your earrings from the spoils. So they spread out a garment, and every one of them threw an earring there from his spoil. The weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments and the pendants and the purple robes. And Gideon made it into an ephod and placed it in his city, and all played the harlot with it there. So it became a snare to Gideon and his household. What does this remind you of? Yeah. Exodus 32, the golden calf. This is deja vu. They're going right back to where they were. One of the most evil acts that they committed in history. And they don't even remember that their granddads just did this and what it cost them. It's showing the crisis that they're in. And Gideon is saying, I can't be king. Yahweh's king. All right, now give me your earrings. Let's go make a false idol. Let's go make a fake ephod. The breastplate that God uses to communicate to Israel, let's go mock that and create another one. And you get a summary in 18 through the rest of the chapter showing how they played the harlot and how Gideon had many wives, but his concubine, who was in Shechem, bore a son, and his name was Abimelech. And he's going to carry us into our next chapter. but they have 40 years of peace. Remember that? When the judge rises up, they give peace for a season, but then they go right back into sin and into captivity. So our sixth judge is Abimelech, and he's going to only rule for 3 years. He's a wicked guy, and we'll see how wicked he is here in chapter 9. We saw he was an illegitimate son. His name means my father is king, or father of a king, which is hard to tell if he's talking about his father is king, which would actually point to Gideon really not being that humble, because he's saying, no, I can't be king. But then he goes and names his son, my father's king, which is completely false humility. Or it could be translated father of a king, meaning, hey, my father didn't want it, but I'm surely going to take it and pass it on from here on out. And he's wicked. He kills all of his brothers except one. He misses one, and he's cursed by his last brother. And they just have total chaos in Israel. The city fights against itself, and this civil war is bigger than the one with Gideon. But we'll look at some of those things that I just spoke of here in chapter 9. So Abimelech comes and he speaks to the leaders of Shechem. In verse 2, he says, which is better for you, that 70 men, all the sons of Gibeon, rule over you, or that one man rule over you? Remember that I am your bone and your flesh. So he's convincing the people that he should be their ruler. He should be their king. In verse 5, he went into his father's house and he killed his brothers, all the sons of Jerubbaal, 70 men on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left and he hid himself. This is the one that curses him. And that curse is found from verse 7 through 21. And through the rest of the chapter, you get the fall of Abimelech. Verse 22 says he rules over Israel for 3 years. Then God sent the evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. That's something we got to talk about, because that could cause a lot of confusion. How could God send an evil spirit and not be complicit in the evil? And we'll need to break that down one day. I don't think I want to do that today. I think I want to do that when we get to Saul consulting a medium, the witch at Endor, and the real Samuel comes through that medium. God used that. We can either do it there, or we might do it with Jehoshaphat and Ahab. God sends another evil spirit there. He says, who will go out and do this for me? And the evil spirit say, hey, I'll do it. And so we're seeing this over and over again, and we need to explain that. So I mean to put you on pins and needles, but I'm running out of time. So I think that'll take more than 5 minutes, and that'll put me over. The goal I like to stay at is either around 15 minutes or shorter. And we really need to end this chapter with the death of Abimelech. And that happens at the close of the chapter. He takes his companies and he's trying to make war. And in verse 50, he comes to the tower and fought against it, but approached the entrance of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain woman threw an upper millstone on Abimelech's head, crushing his skull. Then he called quickly to a young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, draw your sword quick. Draw your sword and kill me, so that it will not be said of me that a woman slew me, because that would be disgraceful and dishonorable to be killed by a woman at that time, which is why we just saw that recently. Remember with Jael and Sisera and Barak and Deborah, when Barak was a coward, Deborah told him, because it is a woman will take your glory and this will shame you. And so you just get this theme continued through here, and God repays him back for killing his 70 brothers. And the chapter ends in verse 57. Also, God returned all of the wickedness of the men of Shechem on their heads, and the curse of Jotham came upon them. Remember, God is always going to get the last laugh. He waited 3 years this time, and he struck after it. And some people think that they're getting away with evil. And in fact, that's why we get mocked as Christians. How can you serve a God who's all powerful, who's all good, who's all knowing, and he doesn't do anything with evil? It's called theodicy, the problem with evil. People are going to throw that question at you all of your Christian life to try to impugn your character. And Peter says this, they mock us and say, your God isn't doing anything. Things have gone just as they were from the beginning. We can eat and drink and be merry, but you got to remember these stories that God keeps an accurate record book. And because he doesn't strike immediately, he has some people on the 3-year plan. He has some people on the 10-year plan. He has some people on the deathbed plan. And he has some people on the eternal plan, eternal punishment. The day of vindication where he clears his name of all guilt because he was innocent to begin with, and he was not going to stand on trial for a human because he is the judge. And so right now, Christian, we just hold on by faith, knowing that will not the judge of all the earth judge justly, and he will. And that's our hope. That's our trust. And we just let the naysayers mock us, and we pray for them, hoping that they won't experience the wrath of the one that they mock. You guys take care and catch you next time.